Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So Politico.com is out. You can see my marked up version of it. This is what happens to news articles when they come out and I can't believe them. What? Politico.com out with this jaw-dropping scoop tonight about a previously undisclosed congressional investigation into the U.S. military apparently diverting C-17 cargo flights to stop at President Trump's golf course in Scotland. Literally to have U.S. airmen stay at his golf resort so that revenue from that goes to President Trump, but also having the C-17s fuel up at commercial rates at a struggling nearby airport that Trump needs to stay open if he's going to keep that golf course open. These flights, these routine flights from Elmendorf Air Base in Alaska back and forth to Kuwait, these supply trips, they always previously refueled at U.S. military bases, which makes sense. They are military flights. But now apparently Congress is investigating the fact that in the Trump era, they've been refueling at Trump's struggling Scottish golf course, stopping there both directions to and from Kuwait. Just astonishing. So this is our life now, right? We get this stream of stories every day now, some more astonishing than others, about the president using his office for his own personal gain, using it to line his pockets, using it to prop up some of the worst performing parts of his business empire. Here's another story along those same lines, but it's the sort of darker iteration of it. It is one thing to use the powers of the presidency to direct taxpayer money into your own pocket. It is an even darker plot to use the powers of the presidency like this. This is a story that was broken, interestingly, today on the editorial page of the Washington Post. Last night on this program, we talked with California Congressman John Garamendi about how the Trump administration is raiding U.S. military funds and defunding a whole bunch of projects for U.S. troops and for the U.S. Armed Forces to instead divert that money to build his border wall. And that poses all sorts of problems for the president, right? I mean, politically, it's a problem in terms of his self-proclaimed support for the military as he takes their funds. It's going to cause him political problems and serious discontent and complaint all around the country where military projects that were promised, including things like elementary schools and daycare centers for the kids of U.S. troops, those things have been promised to U.S. troops and their families. They've been funded by Congress. They've been approved and they're ready to go. Trump is now taking them away because he's taking that money for his own purposes. That's going to be trouble for him. The plan is also going to cause the president some legal trouble, which is a lot of what we talked to Congressman Garamendi about last night. But there is also a specific problem, a specific plot in the way that that Trump is raiding money from the U.S. military overseas. A strikingly large portion of the overseas stuff that Trump is defunding in order to build the wall instead are projects that come under the heading of something called the European Deterrence Initiative or the European Reassurance Initiative. It's the same program, but it's had those two different names. And this is something that was set up by the U.S. government to help our NATO allies that are being threatened by Russia. It was set up basically as pushback against Russian pressure on our NATO allies after Russia invaded Ukraine and took part of that country and started a war in the eastern part of that country. I mean, that program to push back on Russia, that's the stuff that Trump is rescinding funding for overseas. And that, of course, is a great gift to Russia. And it's a very hard thing, I assume, for the Trump administration to defend, which is why they're doing it without saying that's what they're doing. One of the things we talked about last night is that specifically targeted military funding that Trump is taking away, that supposed bulwark against Russia that Trump is taking away, That is one of 4 things that the U.S. government did to try to push back on Russia after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, took part of that country for itself, and started a war there. The U.S. set up this European initiative, the European Reassurance Initiative, which Trump is now defunding. Also, in addition to that, the U.S. took the lead in kicking Putin and Russia out of the G8. So the group of 8 countries would instead become the group of 7 countries because Russia was kicked out over what they did to Ukraine. Both of those things, the European Reassurance Initiative and kicking Putin out of the G8, Trump is trying to undo both of those things, right? In addition, third thing the U.S. did, the U.S. led the Western world in instituting harsh sanctions against Russia. And we know the Trump administration and the Trump transition all the way back to the Trump campaign. They've been scheming quite aggressively to try to undermine or even unilaterally reverse those sanctions. So you look at all the things the U.S. government did to try to push Russia back after it invaded this neighboring country, Ukraine. Trump has tried to undo them all. He's right now trying to undo that funding for military projects in Europe. He is trying to undo Putin getting kicked out of the G7. He has long been trying to undo the sanctions against Putin and Russia. And there's one other thing. There's a fourth thing that the U.S. did in response to Putin invading Ukraine and taking part of that country for itself. I mentioned it last night. We didn't talk about it in detail. The fourth one of those things that the U.S. government did that Trump is now apparently trying to undo is that after Russia invaded Ukraine and took part of that country and started waging this ongoing war there, this ongoing occupation effort in another part of Ukraine, the fourth thing the U.S. government did in response to that, in addition to sanctions, the G7, and the European military projects, the other thing we did was the U.S. government started giving a whole bunch of assistance to Ukraine, aid to Ukraine to help them push back against Russia. And I mentioned last night that President Trump is also trying to take that away. He has put on hold U.S. assistance, including military assistance to Ukraine this year. He said that funding, that assistance to Ukraine, has to be reviewed. Well, the Pentagon apparently reviewed it and decided it's fine, it checks out, we should give him that money. But Trump still won't release it against the Pentagon's wishes. If he doesn't release that aid to Ukraine by the end of the month, it goes away. Ukraine won't get it at all. Well, now, tonight, what the Washington Post is reporting is that aid to Ukraine that's being withheld by the Trump administration, it's not just being withheld by Trump as a favor to Putin, which it is, but according to the Washington Post tonight, Trump is also holding back those hundreds of millions of dollars for Ukraine for another very specific purpose. Quote, Mr. Trump has suspended the delivery of $250 million in U.S. military aid to Ukraine, a country still fighting Russian aggression in its eastern provinces. Some suspect Mr. Trump is once again catering to Mr. Putin, who is dedicated to undermining Ukrainian democracy and independence. But, says the Washington Post, but we are reliably told that the president has a second and more venal agenda. He is attempting to force the new leader of Ukraine to intervene in the 2020 U.S. presidential election by launching an investigation of the leading Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden. What? Mr. Trump is not just soliciting Ukraine's help with his presidential campaign, he is using U.S. military aid that country desperately needs in an attempt to extort it. News tonight is bananas. I mean, we have known that President Trump is holding up this aid to Ukraine. We have known that that is dodgy, right? Given how much of a favor that is to Vladimir Putin and Russia. And given that the president is contradicting the Pentagon and insisting on holding back that money, given that the Trump administration hasn't said anything about the fact that they're doing this, they just hope no one will notice, it's been pretty obvious that something dodgy and worrying is going on here. But if the Washington Post is right, that Ukraine is not getting its military aid unless they do something to try to hurt Joe Biden's presidential campaign? They're trying to get Ukraine to help Trump beat Joe Biden, his expected rival for the 2020 presidential campaign. They want Ukraine's help with that. They want Ukraine to cook something up against Biden or they don't get their money. I mean, if that's really what's going on here, I honestly am going to walk out of this movie. And although this is being newly asserted by the Washington Post editorial board, there's actually a whole lot of reporting that bolsters every part of this case.
It is Monday, the 9th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. We usually have something left over from the cornucopia of abundance from the weekend. And with that, we slice and dice, or maybe we slice it paper thin. And we put it in, well, I don't know, 2-quart casserole for every 6 people. Serve it up for you here in the morning as sort of like an early morning brunch. Or is it a breakfast? Savory though it may be, we're going to sweeten it up with a little bit of humor, dry, sardonic, sick humor, possibly. What do we have left? Oh, God. Yeah, the I don't even want to say it too much, but it's the PB, pussy-ass bee, the pussy-ass bee of the United States. He's going after Chrissy Teigen. What the heck? He watched Lester Holt on a show about prison reform last night. You know, it's... I'll get to everything. It's just so overwhelming, as it always is. So he's watching Lester Holt's show on prison reform, and I guess Holt interviewed John Legend, and apparently Trump felt there wasn't enough fealty paid him in this special because, you know, he enacted some sort of prison reform thing. I don't know, you know, like, regardless. You know, the thing that, what's her face, the Kardashian woman came and lobbied him over. So he did some sort of patronizing type of bill signing with the big, thick black Sharpie, by the way. Let's not forget that. And so he's going after John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, though he didn't name Chrissy Teigen. She's referred to as the foul-mouthed wife. Well, Chrissy doesn't take kindly to being so, I don't know, put aside. She responded like, you know, come on, the pussy-ass bitch didn't, you know, what's up? What's wrong with him? You know, something along those lines. As a side note, apparently Twitter is keeping the hashtag pussy-ass bitch from trending. So they've gotten around it with the PABOTUS, the Pabitus hashtag. So that seems to be trending quite well. Use that, the Pabitus. And so this is what he's doing. While at the same time, Stephen Miller was turning away Bahamian evacuees because they didn't have a visa. You don't need a visa to go to the Bahamas or even come from the Bahamas. But suddenly that rule was changed. Though now the latest is that, you know, the Customs and Border Protection saying, oh, no, it's not Stephen Miller. It was the company. Yeah, it was the company. Stephen Miller called the company. Give me a break. These people were on the ferry ready to get to the United States to escape the abject devastation of Dorian. And we already know that the Santa Monica Goebbels cannot stand black and brown people using the excuse of a calamity to come here to our pristine shores. So Trump is going after John Legend and Chrissy Teigen because NBC didn't pay him enough fealty in a special on prison reform. While at the same time, evacuees are being turned away, taken off the vessel bringing them here to safety because of a rule change that no one knew about. Oh, yeah, I forgot. ICE is saying it was the company. Yes, I know. It was the company. Okay, well, so there's that. The cruelty is the point. We have an election coming up. I believe also the parameters of an actual impeachment inquiry are being drawn up and announced today, or at least the beginning of that process, the true beginning of that process. And I don't know, why not have an impeachment inquiry during a campaign? What better way? What better way to have Oppo research that's actually the research and the investigation of a criminal enterprise? Why not? It would make good TV. Okay, I don't know. Call it Law and Order, I don't know, Swamp. I don't know. I hate the idea. That swamp thing. That's weird. Weird. Well, this is what we're stuck with. He's getting help again. Mitch McConnell is up to his ears in it. What's Lindsey Graham doing with Geert Wilders? It's all connected, folks. It's all connected. I do have one big question. What the hell were military transports landing near Turnberry beginning in 2015? What sort of deal was made by our military with the current fascist-in-chief to prop up an ailing golf course by propping up the ailing airport nearby? What kind of deal was made to do that? I don't know. That's a weird one to me. No one's asking that question. 2015. 95. Everybody's saying, oh yeah, in 2015 hardly any flights were landing there. 95 landed. Then after he became president, it was like 280. What? 95 landings of military fuel refueling at what price? On the retail rate? Was it 95 in 2015 when he was campaigning for president? Or was it just the exploratory part? How was it that the military made that deal to help Trump? Just very, very curious. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, thank you once again. Thank you, Rachel, for laying out how these are connected and that Ukraine is being extorted by Trump for the venal of like a weird campaign sort of thing. Yeah, get stuff on Joe Biden. Gosh darn it, I want to start the show, but as another aside, something that I was attacked on over the weekend or the end of last week is that the troll bots and the idiots and dupes, you know, the actual flesh and blood idiots and dupes, are all on the same page about Joe Biden. They are convinced that we are protecting Joe Biden and he's going to be our president. He's going to be the one that we rally behind. Weird. Because I kind of have an idea it's some other people that are in a better position than Joe. That is extortion and using our funds, the money that would have daycare centers and food and et cetera, taken from the mouths of military babies. I know I'm preaching to the choir. On the rest of the menu, San Francisco made a $2.5 billion bid for Pacific Gas and Electric's power lines and electric infrastructure. Oh yeah, PG&E, who declared bankruptcy because of the wildfires they caused and the liabilities incurred. Beekeepers sued Trump's EPA for the illegal approval of a bee-killing pesticide linked to the nationwide honeybee die-off. And swing state Ohio is purging 235,000 state voters by an election official who called Trump a visionary. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where British Airways pilots ground all of the company's planes in an unprecedented 48-hour strike, and 2 unplundered Mycenaean tombs were discovered at the Aidonia cemetery in Nemea, Greece. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page, definitely located right there by the social media scroll, is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our link to our Patreon site, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. All kidding aside, your generosity has allowed us to continue resisting as the founders of these great United States originally intended media to do. And without your generosity, we would have been unable to do that. Though the bulk of what we do here comes out of our own wallets, it is you who are our biggest contributor, and we thank you for that. You know, it doesn't take much, just, the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink once a month. The cost of that sent our way, and we are masters at making dollars stretch to pay bills. And, of course, we're getting close to being able to get some sort of new machinery here, newish machinery, to replace the workhorses that have worked so hard for so long. And everything needs to be replaced, or at least, phased out in, the pasture and doing a little bit less work. They'll still be working. And we thank you for your generosity in allowing us to achieve those ends. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is very simple. Just go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of @JusticePutnam, but most importantly, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that link out on social media. Very integral part to this multimedia operation, because that's where the facts are, the underlying evidence and literature. So take a look. What we do here is, it's not really embellishing. It's the equivalent of pretty much sitting at the TV, turning the sound down, and making up your own dialogue sometimes. We do that for levity. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, go to @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, because there's billions of them, I bet. Way more than millions. It's got to be billions. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes from anonymous worker bees at Reuters. The city of San Francisco has offered to buy PG&E, that would be Pacific Gas and Electric for those who are not in the know. Well, they want to buy PG&E's power lines and other electrical system infrastructure serving the city for $2.5 billion, according to the utility, which sought Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in January, because all corporations are able to abscond from really the true liability of their crimes in these wildfires that they start. Or how about gas explosions that blow up whole communities? Killing scores. Darn. Things happen. But you can't make a profit unless you withhold services, and you can only withhold services from ratepayers so much. Sometimes you just have to withhold all of that. Well, they don't call it deferred maintenance for nothing now, do you? They're gambling that something won't happen, and it keeps happening. PG&E is expected to file a reorganization plan in a U.S. bankruptcy court in San Francisco this week that addresses its estimated $30 billion in liabilities from wildfires in California in 2017 and 2018, including November's Camp Fire, the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in the state's modern history. We all agree on the importance of continuing to serve the citizens of San Francisco with clean, affordable, and reliable energy, PG&E said in a statement provided by spokeswoman Carly Hernandez. PG&E has been part of San Francisco since the company's founding, more than a century ago. And while we don't believe municipalization is in the best interest of our customers and stakeholders, We are committed to working with the city and will remain open to communication on this issue, the statement added. I should also inform folks that there is a hydroelectric system that also powers the city right now. The cable cars, all of the commons that needs to be electrified is done by Hetch Hetchetty. I know a lot of people hated that, but it's there. And I love the fact that PG&E says that they've been strangling San Francisco since the company first became the company. And why did they become a company? Because they couldn't stand the idea that Hetch Hetchetty was going to power San Francisco. But vast numbers of people are dying because of their incompetence to just make a buck. This next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is by the editorial staff of Earth Justice. Beekeepers, represented by Earth Justice, sued Trump's Environmental Protection Agency for allowing sulfaloxiflor, a bee-killing pesticide linked to a nationwide honeybee die-off, back on the market. The lawsuit comes as beekeepers around the country lost over 40% of their colonies this last year, which is on top of all of the, 40 to 60% of their colonies from previous years, every year. Back to the story. Touted as the next-generation neonicotinoid, sulfaloxiflor is like other bee-killing neonicotinoid insecticides. It is systemic, meaning it is absorbed into the growing plant, making it toxic to insects for many days thereafter. When foraging honeybees bring back to the hive pollen and nectar tainted with sulfaloxiflor, the effect on the entire colony can be catastrophic. Honeybees and other pollinators are dying in droves because of insecticides like sulfaloxiflor, yet the Trump administration removes the restrictions just to please the chemical industry. This is illegal and an affront to our food system, economy, and environment, said Greg Lowry, an Earth Justice attorney. EPA first approved sulfaloxiflor in 2013, but thanks to a lawsuit brought by Pollinator Stewardship Council and the American Beekeeper Federation and Earth Justice, the Ninth Circuit overturned that decision. The court ruled EPA failed to obtain reliable studies regarding the impact of sulfaloxiflor on honeybee colonies. Well, I would say that they actually had the studies and they thought, heck, they're just a bunch of bees. They're in the way. Spotted owls. They're spotted owls. In 2016, EPA reapproved sulfaloxiflor subject to significant restrictions to reduce the risk to honeybees and other pollinators. On July 12th of 2019, without any public notice, the Trump administration removed these restrictions and approved a host of new uses for the bee-killing insecticide. Because, once again, the black guy liked it, and it's got to be undone. And also, when you're deconstructing the administrative state, property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. we begin with this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I failed to mention that Think Progress went out of business. We are unable to keep our true blue media funded properly to be able to give us rational news. Yeah, Think Progress brought us progressive news for progressives, but they still hew to journalistic practices like we expect. We don't need propaganda, but it is just disconcerting that they couldn't keep themselves funded. I know that they kept themselves very separate from the center of American politics. But it would have been nice to have a little bit of funding pushed their way somehow. We got to figure it out. Because that was a great content provider, I got to say. All right, well, Oliver Willis of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Ohio is purging 235,000 voter registrations, despite evidence that thousands of the registrations for deletion were eligible to vote. Who cares? We'll figure it out in a few years when it doesn't matter. Ohio has historically been a key swing state in presidential elections, going back and forth between two parties. Trump won it in 2016, while Obama won it in 2012 and 2008. In 2018, Senator Sherrod Brown won re-election there, but so did Governor Mike DeWine, highlighting the fact that neither party has a lock on the state's votes. Frank LaRose, Ohio's Secretary of State, is spearheading the purge. Last year, Rose called Trump a visionary leader and a disruptor. Well, yeah, I suppose if you are bought off on the state level by... Are there any Russian investments coming in Ohio, Mr. LaRose? Let's look. Purges have been a key element in Republican voter suppression efforts. A purge of voters in Georgia last year, that'd be the state, not the nation, though it might apply to both, was followed by a victory there for the Republican gubernatorial candidate by a slim margin. According to HuffPost, LaRose initially published a list of 235,000 voters at risk of losing their registrations in August, but soon discovered there were errors and corrected them. Republicans in the state have said the purges are an attempt to keep the voting rolls accurate with information about currently active voters, but the process by which inactive voters are determined is flawed. Later in August, however, voting rights groups identified another 4,000 residents on the list who were active voters and slated to be purged. Those groups, the League of Women Voters, obviously a commie organization, the NAACP, black extremist identities, or black identity extremists. I can never figure out what their acronyms anymore. Black identity extremists. All Voting is Local, obviously socialists, and the Fair Election Center, another socialist organization, wrote a release to protest LaRose's crusade. Thousands of voters are at risk of losing the fundamental right to vote by a system that has been shown time and again to be deeply flawed, said Mike Brickner, Ohio State Director of All Voting is Local. African Americans had to fight, and some even died for people of color to get the right to vote, said Tom Roberts, president of the NAACP Ohio State Conference. So why would anyone think, because I did not exercise my right to vote, that this right should be taken away? The right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy, and use it or lose it is wrong. The Ohio Democratic Party sued over the process, citing errors in the list, but lost its case. Trump's victory in Ohio in 2016 was a surprise, but as in the national trends, he has lost standing there over the course of his presidency. At the start of his term, Ohio was one of the few states where Trump had a positive approval rating, but his support there has since decreased by 19 percentage points to 46%. 54% disapprove. Think of it that way. Recent polling has shown Trump in a close race against Democratic presidential candidates, and it doesn't even matter which one, even Yang. And he's even losing in some instances. All right. The 2020 election could come down to the closest of margins, and the man who hailed Trump as a visionary leader is making key decisions about who can and cannot vote. And we shall not let them get away with it again, shall we? Well, we better get on with our break, and when we get back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Heady or Not. Back in November 2016, directors Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette had a film to pitch. Quite by coincidence, they found themselves pitching it in Trump's America, like the day of Trump's America. In this new crap show of a political reality, some in the industry were looking for ways to uplift audiences while also quietly saying, hey, this is kind of wrong. And thus the pitched movie began to change into its final form. Ready or Not is, in essence, a slasher film, where instead of a bunch of kids and one killer, there's Samara Weaving playing the final girl new bride, Grace, and a crew of killers played by Mark O'Brien, Adam Brody, Henry Czerny, Andy McDowell, and a whole bunch of other great people. They are Grace's uber-rich in-laws hunting down their lower-class new daughter-in-law. I wonder if the final pitch for this film was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets Clue, meets Get Out, meets that short story we used to read in middle school. It's a quote-unquote dark comedy, and everybody on their press junkets is talking about the film's subversive political message. Weaving herself said it was fun seeing the 1%, quote, taken down a notch. And I say, you call that taking them down a notch? Because I call Ready or Not maybe giving them a paper cut, maybe inviting them to a tickle fight. Sure, I get how the movie shows the callous disregard for life that privilege and wealth breeds, but honestly, that observation is more narrative background than anything the movie seriously examines. Mostly, this flick's just a nice-looking, well-acted, decently directed, diverting survival chase, which leads us back to the directors, who say they wanted a film that would primarily entertain, and maybe slide in some commentary if someone cares to look. But here's the thing. When dealing with a fascist administration that's running concentration camps and hunting down brown people like... okay, admittedly like that short story we read in middle school, I don't know if you both get to take a stand and be light and escapist at the same time. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christine Herman. Got a minute? Polyurethane. It's used to make seat cushions, memory foam, paint, and myriad other products. Unfortunately, due to its widespread use, more than 1 million tons of polyurethane waste end up in U.S. landfills each year. It's not that easy to recycle polyurethane, so the main alternative to just tossing the stuff is incineration. However,
incineration produces toxic byproducts, requires a lot of heat, so a lot of energy input to bring it down to something that you can get rid of.
University of Illinois chemistry professor Steve Zimmerman. He and his team therefore set out to tweak the molecules that make up polyurethane to make it easier for it to be converted into other useful materials. The molecular tweaking involves inserting a chemical linker known as an acetal into one of the components that make up polyurethanes found in rubber bands, packaging, and car parts. The acetal linker readily cleaves in the presence of acid.
So we're breaking it down to materials that are actually different than we started with. And so what we're doing is using those to make other polyurethanes.
In the particular process recently presented by Zimmerman's grad student Ephraim Murado at the National Meeting of the American Chemical Society in San Diego, the new polyurethanes behave like superglue.
And it actually works better than superglue.
The biggest hurdle to widespread use is the cost. But Zimmerman hopes further research will cut costs down so that the glue-making method will really stick. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christine Herman.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
If you like sugar, the full-page photograph in the recent New York Times Magazine of a typical enormous chain store candy display should warm your heart, but the accompanying headline and story should send shudders up and down your spine. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The article, part of the 1619 Project, is written by Harvard professor Khalil Gibran Muhammad, and the large font text in the page facing the photo says, quote, "The sugar that saturates the American diet has a barbaric history as the white gold that fueled slavery." As Muhammad writes, quote, "Most of these stories of brutality, torture, and premature death have never been told in classroom textbooks or historical museums. They have been refined and whitewashed in the mills and factories of Southern folklore, the Romantic South, the Lost Cause, the popular Moonlight and Magnolias plantation tours so important to Louisiana's agritourism today. Also, as of today, Americans on average consume 75 to 80 pounds of sugar a year. Today, the sugarcane farming business, for the most part, excludes African Americans. Today, the tentacles and remnants of sugar slavery continue. And this story about sugar should appropriately leave a bad taste in your mouth. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. 16 striking Filipino sugar workers on the Hawaiian island of Kauai were killed by police. This incident is known as the Hanapipi Massacre. Filipinos began immigrating to Hawaii to work on the sugar plantations around 1906. By 1924, there were nearly 50,000 Filipino workers. In 1919, Pablo Manlipit organized the Filipino Labor Union and started recruiting Filipino workers from the Hawaiian sugar plantations. The Hawaiian Territorial Legislature passed an anti-picketing law in 1923. Picketers could receive up to 10 years in prison. In 1924, Manlipit led an 8-month strike of plantation workers on Kauai. Workers demanded $2 a day in wages and an 8-hour workday. The plantation owners brought in scab labor. They also used armed forces and spies to crush the strike. Plantation owners turned workers out of their homes, and on this day, the police, armed with clubs and guns, came to the union's headquarters. They claimed to be looking for 2 scab laborers they thought were being held prisoner by the union. Filipino strikers were armed only with homemade weapons and knives and a few guns. The Associated Press wrote, 20 persons dead, unnumbered injured lying in hospital. Officers under orders to shoot strikers as they approach. 16 of the dead were strikers, and 4 were police. After the massacre, police arrested 101 male protesters. 60 received 4-year jail sentences. Manlipit was sentenced to 10 years. Others claimed he had been framed and that witnesses had been promised $10,000 to lie during the trial. He was then paroled on the condition that he leave Hawaii. 3 months after the massacre, the strike disintegrated. In 2006, the mayor of Hanapipi and Filipino community leaders dedicated a concrete marker honoring the 16 Filipinos who died during the massacre.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, September 9th, 2019. I'm Mark Belanger.
Don't believe the corporate lies.
That is Robert Reich, a former U.S. Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton. He is now a professor of public policy at the University of California, Berkeley. Mr. Reich.
Wealthy corporations and their enablers have spread 5 big lies about unions in order to stop workers from organizing and to protect their own bottom lines. Know the truth. Lie number 1, labor unions are bad for workers. Wrong. Unions are good for all workers, even those who aren't unionized. In the mid-1950s, when a third of all workers in the United States were unionized, wages grew in tandem with the economy. That's because workers across America, even those who were not unionized, had significant power to demand and get better wages, hours, benefits, and working conditions. Since then, as union membership has declined, the middle class has shrunk as well. Lie number 2. Unions hurt the economy. Wrong. When workers are unionized, they can negotiate better wages, which in turn spreads the economic gains more evenly and strengthens the middle class. This creates a virtuous cycle. Wages increase, workers have more to spend in their communities, businesses thrive, and the economy grows. Since the 1970s, the decline in unionization accounts for 1/3 of the increase in income inequality. Without unions, wealth becomes concentrated at the top, and the gains don't trickle down to workers. Lie number 3, labor unions are as powerful as big business. Wrong. Labor union membership in 2018 accounted for 10.5% of the American workforce, while large corporations account for almost 3/4 of the entire American economy. And when it comes to political power, it's big business and small labor. In the 2018 midterms, labor unions contributed less than $70 million to parties and candidates, while big corporations and their political action committees contributed $1.6 billion. This enormous gulf between business and labor is a huge problem. It explains why most economic gains have been going to executives and shareholders rather than workers. But this doesn't have to be the case. Lie number 4. Most unionized workers are in industries like steel and auto manufacturing. Wrong again. Although industrial unions are still vitally important to workers, the largest part of the unionized workforce is workers in the professional and service sectors, retail, restaurant, hotel, hospital, teachers, which comprise 59% of all workers represented by a union. And these workers benefit from being in a union. In 2018, unionized service workers earned a median wage of $802 a week. Non-unionized service workers made an average $261 less. That's almost 1/3 less. Lie number 5. Most unionized workers are white, male, and middle-aged. Some unionized workers are, of course, but most newly unionized workers are not. They're women. They're young, and a growing portion are black and brown. In fact, it's through the power of unions that people who had been historically marginalized in the American economy because of their race, ethnicity, or gender are now gaining economic ground. In 2018, women who were in unions earned 21% more than non-unionized women. And African Americans who were unionized earned nearly 20% more than African Americans who were non-unionized. Don't believe the corporate lies. Today's unions are growing, expanding, and boosting the wages and economic prospects of those who need them most. They're good for workers.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Radio Labor's daily newscasts are available on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook at Speakeasy. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we will be only topping out to be between 73 and 75. A chance of a slight chance, they say, of a rain shower here and there. We had a little bit of splattering yesterday, but not much. But we feel that the axis has turned towards fall. Yep, and so we will be having mostly cloudy conditions throughout the day, cooler conditions as well. Overnight lows in the mid to upper 50s. More clouds overnight with a little bit more chance of precipitation. And a stray shower or thunderstorm tomorrow with highs in the mid 70s also. Winds will be light and variable in the coming days, though they will be out of the southwest in a couple of hours at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Air quality index has dropped somewhat in the good range at 27 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains high at 6. Barometric pressure locally is rising at 30 inches. Oh, I'm sorry. Had to get a refresh. It is actually falling at 30 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 93%. Yes, so we shall have some rain, I believe. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 61 and mostly cloudy, with a slight chance of a Brexit. Oh, yes. Paris is 68 and sunny. Rome is 78 and fair. Kiev is 81 and fair. Kabul is 82 and fair. Yeah, he was going to bring the Taliban to Camp David. Can't sit down with Mueller, but he wants to face the Taliban at Camp David. Well, they have fair conditions in Kabul. Maybe he should build a hotel there. Hong Kong is 82 and fair. Tokyo is 85 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 53 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 57 and partly cloudy with a wind advisory. And New York, New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Sandel of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. British Airways pilots began a 2-day strike today, grounding nearly all of its flights and disrupting thousands of passengers in a dispute over pay. The airline, part of the International Airlines Group, canceled 1,700 flights to and from London's Heathrow and Gatwick airports on Monday and Tuesday ahead of action by British Airline Pilots Association members in BA's first ever pilot strike. I am really sorry that the cynical actions of the pilots union have put us in this position, BA Chief Executive Alex Cruz told BBC Television. It is by all accounts an own goal. It's going to punish customers. It's going to punish our brand. It's going to punish the rest of the colleagues. IAG shares were down more than 2% in early trading. British Airways has offered its pilots an 11.5% pay raise over 3 years, which said it would take the pay of its highest-earning captains from about $205,000 plus £16,000 in allowances to just over £200,000. So from £167,000 to $200,000, you do the math. Its pilots on average earn around £90,000 a year. The union wants the pay deal to include profit sharing. No. The mob, the rabble, having a part of our stakeholders. No, it's just not done. The airline said it had no detail from the union on which pilots would strike and had no way of predicting how many would come to work or which aircraft they are qualified to fly, so had no option but to cancel nearly 100% of its flights. Following strikes on Monday and Tuesday, another day of industrial action is scheduled for September 27th. British Airways has been criticized over its communications with passengers ahead of the strike, which has caused thousands of people to change their travel plans.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Staff at Tornos News out of Greece brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 2 new unplundered chamber tombs dating from the late Mycenaean. That, of course, is the period of the Mycenaean palaces, about 1400 to 1200 BC, were unearthed during the systematic research project of the Antiquities Effort of Corinth at the Mycenaean cemetery of Aidonia in Nemea. The first of the 2 tombs, which preserved its chamber roof, contained 2 primary burials and the collected bones of 14 more individuals. The second tomb had no roof as it had collapsed in the Mycenaean times. Inside and above it, however, 3 primary burials were discovered. Both chamber tombs yielded clay vessels and figurines, along with small objects such as buttons. These findings can be compared with the burial goods of the early Mycenaean terms, 1600 to 1400 BC, excavated in previous years at Aidonia, and contained tableware and storage vessels, weapons, and artifacts indicating status. The 2 new unplundered Mycenaean chamber tombs at Aidonia point towards an understanding of the site's evolution over time and its association with the palatial systems of the surrounding areas, Mycenaean in particular. Do take a look at the article. It's got the photographs are quite stunning, and it's quite rare. They hadn't been found. All right, we got to get out of here, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.